So I thought we would start with a little Bible reading this morning just to provide a little shock to our Unitarian Universalist systems. There will actually be a point. It's the good book, we call it. Actually, it's not a book. It is a library. It only appears to be a book because we managed to squeeze it between two fat covers. It's actually a library of multiple texts, books of poetic verse, songs, narratives, laws, philosophical narratives, prophetic and moral treatises, genealogies, and more, constructed and assembled and modified and loved and cherished by one or multiple cultures over hundreds and hundreds of years. Think of our own English literature and the changing cultural and historical context just in the time since Shakespeare. How many changes have there been culturally and in the language? And you get to begin to get a picture of the changes in those texts. Yet some things never change. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So too it is with the Hebrew Scriptures. So much has changed and so much has not. But there is one foundational myth, the dream of a people at the core, that has remained from ancient tribal religion centered on ritual sacrifice through the kingdom and empire period, and through exile, diaspora, and the ethical faith of modern Judaism. And that one thing at the core is the myth of the Promised Land. I remember in my former life, in my 20s, I was painting houses, trying to get through grad school, to what end I was uncertain, and sitting in my Toyota pickup truck at lunch, Bruce Springsteen came on the radio. The dogs on Main Street howl because they understand. If I could take one moment into my hands, Mister, I ain't a boy. No, I'm a man, and I believe in a promised land. And I resonated with every single note. I said it's a foundational myth, and I hope you'll join me for a moment in putting aside that common use of the word myth, which is used to distinguish between true and false, historical and non-historical, and put your anthropologist hat on, where myth simply means a story that gives meaning to the life of a people. There may be historical elements or not inside the myth, but that is completely beside the point. A myth is the soul of a society in story form. It's like a dream that you have that by which you interpret your personal story. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you, Abraham's God told him. And then some time passes in our story, and the descendants of Abraham have multiplied in Egypt and are now an enslaved religious minority. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and say, "Thus says Yahweh, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh says, "Who is Yahweh, that I should heed his voice and let Israel go?" I don't know anything about this Yahweh. Never met him, never made a deal with him. "Let the people go," Moses and Aaron insist. Pharaoh answers with new regulations. Now the people have to spend part of their day collecting their own additives for the brick and make just as many as before. Quote, "Let heavier work be laid upon them, that they may labor at it and pay no regard to lying words." I think Pharaoh just called out Moses and Aaron for fake news. I don't know. "The practice of your religion means nothing to me. Your freedom means nothing to me," is what he's saying. Is it any wonder that this story of oppression and deliverance resonated so mightily in the hearts and minds of African American slaves? Come and go with me to that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. People leave home for many reasons. They leave for food. They leave for freedom. They leave for family. Food or economic necessity, like the Irish who immigrated in the 19th century due to their potato. You say it however you want, I'll do the same. The famine, the potato famine. People leave for freedom, political and religious, or they just come for family. They follow their family, or they want to make a better home for their family. Hi-ho, this I know, everyone wants to feel at home. People will leave to find their home. Well, isn't that how we got here? Because we or our forebears hoped and believed and put feet into motion? And who are the people coming today? Amir Hussain, professor of religion at LMU, once told me, he said, if you want to know what Islam is like, talk to a Muslim. Don't go looking for obscure texts in the Quran about killing the infidels. That makes as much sense, and then try to put your neighbor, your Muslim neighbor or coworker into that box. That makes as much sense as finding something in Leviticus about animal sacrifice or the conquest of Canaan and trying to interpret your Jewish or Christian neighbor's religion through that lens. If you want to know what an immigrant's experience is, talk to an immigrant. So I talked to some immigrants. I'm a curious person my whole life. Somebody comes from another country, I want to know. I don't get to travel as much as people get to travel here, so I talk. And then I went back and talked to some of those folks I've known over the years. One of the most recent is Bashir, who is, he's like me, he's got a grandson playing baseball in Little League. We met on the baseball field, and we began to talk. I'm a curious person, and Bashir is one of the most extroverted people I know. He grew up in a small, poor village, Lilla, in the salt and rain mountains of Pakistan, in a home with dirt floors, no plumbing, and no electricity. But there were street lights, so if you wanted to read or study, you could go stand under the street light and read your book. Well, by a stroke of luck, the family moved to the bigger city of Lohar, and another stroke of luck, he got into a Swiss technical college. And another stroke of luck, his brother came to the US and began a PhD program at Indiana U, and he followed him there, got a job in a machine shop, which he hated. And then he decided he needed a college degree, made his own itinerary, stole his brother's car, or borrowed it without permission, depending on which interpretation you want to apply, visited these universities, and went into the department chair at Vanderbilt, said, I want to study here and I need a job. He was hired and admitted. Now, when I heard the story about the car and the travel, I knew this guy was an American already. Rules are good, and they're also good to break now and again. So Bashir has been here since 1968, and he said when he first came here, he didn't really notice a lot of prejudice against Middle Easterners or Muslims. And then the oil embargo of 73, 74 happened, and he noticed a change. And then 9/11 happened, and he noticed another change. Now, there's something you should know about the name Muhammad. In Pakistan or Afghanistan, I'm told, every man is named Muhammad. It's their religious name, and then their actual first name is their second name. It only looks like their second name when you translate it to English. So Muhammad is at the head of the sentence. So I'm listening on the baseball field to Bashir, And he's on the phone trying to change travel arrangements for and add people to the cruise up the California coast that he had booked. You with me so far? And I hear him on the phone. He says, "Yes, my name is Mohammed. Yes, I understand about security. I worked in the Pentagon for 20 years. So you would think this would get tiresome, but he's a very patient man. I spoke with his son, Omar, who told me how in college in 2003, he was pulled out of a line at the airport and detained for 3 hours. And they went through everything he owned, including his checkbook. Now, Omar is as American as fireworks on the 4th of July. He's the chief operating officer now of a big hospital. And they looked at his checkbook and they said, "Those are some pretty big amounts you've written." He said, "Yeah, that's my rent." It must get very tiresome. And I asked Bashir about these things. And I have to drag it out of him, but he says, Islam is a peaceful religion. These people, the terrorists, are not practicing Islam. The problem is the politicians who misuse the terrorist attacks. What's good about America, I ask, wanting to know, not my opinion, because I have my opinions. I want to hear it from an immigrant. America is a country of opportunity. Hard work pays you no matter who you are. This country was made by immigrants. James Zahn is from Beijing, China. He was born in 1950 the year of the snake, same as me. I met him after a performance of the Westlake Symphony that I attended at the reception. And he told me a little bit of his story, that when he was 16 years old, it was during the Cultural Revolution, which, if you recall, was Chairman Mao's attempt to wipe out all Western influence and return the country to original, pure Maoist philosophy. So James was taken out of school when he was 16, sent to a farm in the northeast of China to work in the soy fields, where he stayed for 5 years. Now, what were you doing when you were 16? I was in high school, getting ready for college, getting ready to drop out of college, making my own choices. And when James told me the story, he finished it by saying, "I brought my violin," which I took to be a quiet act of resistance and defiance. You can send me away, but I'm going to continue making music on this instrument that you call Western because of its accident of history, but which makes notes of beauty that are universal and unbounded by ideology. Fatima is somebody I've known for maybe 15 years. She's in her late 30s. She was born in a middle-class family in Kabul, Afghanistan, in 1979, during the war with Russia, a war her family sought to escape. First, the father left, moved to Germany, and then he brought the rest of the family. Fatima remembers being told to hide under the blankets as they passed through the Khyber Pass in the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The family lived in Germany through her 5th grade, and she now speaks with a hybrid German, Afghani, American accent. The family moved again to the US, where they had relatives. Nearing the end of high school, Fatima decided she would go to UC Santa Cruz, even if she had to go to community college first. That was her dream. But her father said, "No, you're a girl." And while her parents were professional people and somewhat westernized in their attitudes, they were also very traditional. And a woman in Afghanistan can become a doctor, anything, only though if the husband or father says she can. A girl has more freedom until she's in puberty. Then it's no more wearing shorts, no swimming in public, no volleyball. Such activities could jeopardize a young woman's virtue as a virgin. Our father would hit us and verbally abuse us, she said. In Afghani culture, it's accepted to beat the wife and children. I would hit back, Fatima said. I had to leave home. If I didn't, I would die spiritually. I asked Fatima how she felt now in the current climate in which immigrants are being demonized, and especially I asked her about the travel ban. She said she was shocked, frustrated, mad, and here's why. She says, I feel very grateful to be in the U.S., to be a citizen, which finally happened for her last year. I love the diversity. I said to myself, if the Hispanic students, the white students, the African Americans, the Japanese and Chinese students can be American, then I can be. In Germany, you are either German or an Ausländer, an outsider. And it never changes. You could be born there. You could be half German and half Turkish, and you are still an Ausländer. As a teenager, she says, I used to say, I'm from the planet Earth. Why do we have to have politics in countries? Why can't we have a holistic point of view? I didn't feel like I had a country. Now I do. The U.S. is that place for me. I do belong. But it took a while. What's good about America, Fatima? The national parks, the beauty, you can move from state to state. I love the opportunities immigrants have here, the opportunity to make your dreams come true. Get an education. And people are curious. They ask you where you are from. Doesn't that bother you? I want to know. She says no. I was so glad to hear that because I put my foot in my mouth too many times, not waiting till the appropriate moment to express my curiosity. But she said, no, I feel like a cultural ambassador. I like to break their prejudices, to burst their bubble. I met Naseem Kansari when she was a student assistant at the construction department at the university where I was helping to build buildings. She's a first-generation Iranian American. Her life here was immersed in Persian culture. Her sister's in the Navy, her brother's a police officer. This American family's life began here in 1984. Her mother, whose father had worked for the Shah, wanted to leave because of Khomeini and the Islamic Revolution that was trying to send the country back to the 7th century in terms of women's rights. When she was 6 years old, her mother sought a divorce, and that experience and the custody battles led her to want to become a lawyer from a very young age, and she thought it would be family law. But then she graduated from college and she went to work for AmeriCorps for 2 years, teaching immigrants English, which changed the course of her life. And she decided to go into public interest law. She's now in her 3rd year at Loyola Law School. Her current job is working for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, a nonprofit that advocates for the civil and human rights of Asian Americans and other undeserved communities to promote a fair and equitable society for all. Her responsibilities lie mostly in working with the Hispanic population because she speaks 3 languages, English, Farsi, and Spanish. So she knows something about immigrants, and I asked her, what has changed recently, if anything? She says there's an increase in fear and mistrust. Some are inspired to come forward and stand up for their rights. Others are retreating to the shadows. And she tells me a story about one of her colleagues who held an event at a public library where they offer free legal services to people who want citizenship. But they were told by many people that they were afraid it was a government trap to offer these services, only to catch them and deport them. There are many things that she loves about America. When she hears of her mother's experience in Iran, she's grateful for her freedom as a woman. What's good about America, Nassim? She has learned from working with the immigrant population that despite the troubles with discrimination, you can still have that American dream here. No matter what, you're able to start a life, work hard, and have your own success, however you define it, which is not necessarily true in their home countries. Now, this month here, we are talking about faith. And I've been thinking about that in this journey. I suppose that no journey is ever begun without faith, whether implicitly or with intention. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Asked Christina Rossetti in her poem, Uphill. Yes, to the very end. Will the day's journey take the whole day long? From morn to night, my friend. But is there for the night a resting place, a roof for when the slow dark hours begin? We have this hope intrinsic to our human nature that there will be a place for us. It's not a proven theorem. It's not something you can show in a calculation. It's buried deep within us, this hope and this trust that we will find a place, that we belong. A place in the sun, so says Stevie Wonder. Like a long, lonely stream, I keep running toward a dream, moving on, like a branch on a tree. 'Cause there's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone. Moving on. We're talking about faith here. The promised land is not a physical place necessarily, and probably never was. It is anywhere that life can be purposely lived in relation to others. It has certainly never been a place of greed, coercion, or oppression, but of community, justice, and equity, of love. That's what the wise writers of Deuteronomy said in the evolution of this Judeo-Christian story when they wrote, "You are to love the foreigner, the stranger among you, because you were the stranger, the other, the Auslander in Egypt." Egypt, the mythic symbol of all the oppressors and those that would demean a human life. I learned long ago the difference between faith as a set of beliefs, fides in Latin, those changeable opinions and ideas subject to review, proofs, revision, or sometimes abandonment. And faith, on the other hand, as fiducia, which is trust. That rock bottom elemental feeling that you belong in this awesome, beautiful web of all existence, where you and I are held by a power greater than ourselves. Am I not a child of the universe? Do I not belong? The dignity and worth of every human being applies to me, and if it applies to me, It applies to everyone. That's the country I want to live in. That's what my country should be about. Now imagine Willie Nelson singing the words of David Lynn Jones. There is a winding road across a shifting sand, and room for everyone living in the promised land. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Wo-ya-ya. And those of you that like to read ahead know that we'll be singing that in a few minutes. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Wo-ya-ya. We choose hope. We choose faith. So be it.